everyone, it's Angela from Cake Angel, and today I'm going to show you how to make your very own marshmallow fondant at home. And for this we're going to be using 8 ounces of mini marshmallows, a pound of icing sugar, 2 tablespoons of water and 1 teaspoon of clear vanilla extract. So let's get going. The first thing we need to do is add our marshmallows into a microwavable bowl. We will be using a microwave for this process, and I'm adding my water to that. And then you're going to pop that in the microwave and put the microwave on high for around a minute, and you want to keep an eye on it. The marshmallow will actually expand, they'll melt a little bit, it'll get quite puffy as well, so you need a big bowl. This is what it looks like when it comes out after a minute. You're going to give it a really good stir, and you'll notice straight away that it becomes very elastic and sticky and stringy. So you just want to beat that down and knock all the air out of it. And we're just going to keep stirring it and making sure all those lumps of marshmallow have dissolved. Now if they haven't, you can pop it back in the microwave for another 10 seconds, but keep an eye on it because it is sugary and it can burn very quickly. So just do it for about 10 seconds more at a time. So you can see from this, there's hardly any lumps left. We're going to give it another really good stir. And the nice thing about using marshmallows is that they taste great. So your fondant is going to taste a lot nicer than the store-bought fondant. Who doesn't like the taste of marshmallows? Okay, so next we're going to add our vanilla. So as I mentioned earlier, we're using clear vanilla extract. Reason we're using clear is we don't want it to change the color of the fondant. Now if you are going to color it anyways and you're not too concerned whether it is an ivory color, you can absolutely go right ahead and use regular vanilla, but I'm going to keep this white, so I'm using the clear one instead. Give that a really good stir in to make sure it's nice and incorporated. So you can see there's no lumps at all now as well. So now we're going to start adding our icing sugar. Now this is a messy job to make homemade fondant, so don't worry that your counters are going to get a little bit messy. Give that a stir. And it's going to start to come together. So you want to keep stirring until it's almost at the point where the marshmallow comes away from the side of the bowl. You can see how stringy and sticky that is. So we still have quite a lot of icing sugar left at this point, but don't worry, it will use the majority of it. I'm going to add the rest of it now. And then we're going to continue to stir that in until we can't add any more icing sugar into it. Now it is a bit of a workout when you do this as well. You could do it in a stand mixer if you have one, but I wanted to show you it by hand as a lot of people may not have a stand mixer. So you can see the mixture starts to look a little bit drier now as it incorporates all of that icing sugar. Still quite a bit left at the bottom of this bowl. And so to finish it off, what we're going to do is actually dump this out onto our counter. So I'm using a board for this. You could do it on the counter as long as you've thoroughly cleaned it, obviously. You could do it on a roll and cut mat, whatever you have. But just bear in mind that it gets very sticky. It's going to get messy, but it does clean up really easily too. So let's just make sure we've got all of that out of the bowl. So you can see there's a lot of icing sugar left to incorporate. So now, once you've got your hands thoroughly cleaned, we're simply going to start kneading it in. Again, this gets messy, your hands will get incredibly sticky, but trust the process, this does work and it will eventually come together nicely. So I'm kind of doing a stretching motion, I'm pushing it down with the palm of my hand and I'm stretching it, and you just want to keep going until the fondant no longer feels sticky. It is going to stick to your hands to start with, and obviously if you have hot hands it's going to get even more messy, but just keep going. kind of like kneading bread in a way as well. So you can see how much is stuck to my hand, but again, I'm going to keep going. If you are really concerned about it, you could use gloves. You can also put a little bit of shortening on your hands, which will help. I tend not to do that because my hands are quite warm and I like to feel the fondant in my hand as well. But whatever works for you, the goal here is that we're trying to just knead in as much of that ice and sugar as we can. And again, once it's no longer sticky, you can stop the kneading in process, but we've still got quite a lot to do here, so let's get that sped up. So you'll notice that it is starting to look a little less glossy. That means we're almost there in terms of adding as much icing sugar as it needs. The amount of icing sugar is 1 pound of icing sugar, which is about 4 cups. You may need more, you may need slightly less. It also depends on the humidity in your kitchen when you're making this as well, as it is going to absorb some of that moisture in the air. So just bear that in mind, you may need to make some slight adjustments to the amount. Also a good tip if you're doing this on a board as I am, pop some silicone underneath or some paper towels just to keep that board still. As you can see, I forgot to do that here, but I wanted you guys to see that you can still work with whatever you have. Notice that it's stretching really nicely as well, so that's also another sign that it's coming together really nicely. You'll also notice that the feel of your hands, if you are doing this without wearing gloves, that suddenly it stops sticking to your hand and it actually starts to come away from your hand too. So you've got a little bit more to add in. I'm just going to keep going, kneading and stretching. You'll also find that the fondant starts to feel smooth too once you're almost at the end of adding in the icing sugar. Okay, so I'm just going to pick off those last bits of fondant off of my hand just to get those incorporated as well. Now I can tell that my fondant is feeling a lot smoother now. It doesn't feel grainy at all from kneading in all the ice and sugar. We're just going to try and incorporate the rest of it and keep going. As I said, it is quite a long process and you can absolutely do this in the stand mixer as well. So notice how when I'm just rolling this back and forth, it is picking up icing sugar still, so it needs a little bit more. You can always split it up into a couple of different smaller piles if you find that easier to work with. So we're getting some really good stretches with it now, and you can see it's not really sticking to my hands as much either. Definitely a workout. Okay, so I'm happy with that. As you can see, it's not really incorporating any more ice and sugar, so that's as much as we need to do with it. I'm just going to roll it now back and forth and stretch it to try and get it into a nice smooth ball. And of course, if you were wanting to make an entire batch of the same colour, you would add your colouring in at the same time that we added our flavour in, before you start to knead it together. Okay, so a little bit more icing sugar just to give it that final roll. So it's still a little bit too sticky for my liking. It is humid as well. When I was making this, it was pretty humid in my kitchen. I'm just going to add a little bit more icing sugar. And what I find is overall marshmallow fondant is generally a little tackier than store-bought fondant. And I like to make it on the slightly stickier side so that I can add icing sugar to it when I start working with it as well. If you tend to add too much icing at this stage, then it's going to be really stiff and really difficult to work with when you start to roll it out to cover a cake, or if you're using it to make fondant figures or use it in fondant molds. Okay, there we go. Really nice and smooth, bright white because we've only used white ingredients. And that's your marshmallow fondant done. So I'm just going to clean up. I'm going to wash my hands. You can see there's a little bit on there, but not as much as there was in the beginning. And then I'm going to show you the next stage. Okay, so now I'm going to just quickly show you how much the fondant that we made weighs to give you an idea of the quantity that this recipe makes. There are going to be slight variations depending on the amount of icing sugar that you ended up using, and I'm going to lay it on plastic wrap to show you how to wrap it as well. Now you can use this fondant straight away, but I find it usually is a little bit easier to work with if you wrap it for a while, let it sit for about an hour. And it gives some of that elasticity time to develop, and you'll have an easier time working with it. Okay, so we've got 1.7 pounds, 23 ounces, which is about 665 grams. And all in all, if you add up the ingredients for this, it's about $2.20 Canadian to make this batch, so you can see that's very, very much cheaper than buying store-bought fondant as well. So to wrap it, I'm just going to fold the plastic wrap around it. This is the best way to store it as well when you're not using it. It'll last for about 6 months. You can freeze it, you can just keep it in a sealed box as well, and have fun with it. Don't forget to comment below if you try it out on anything, and like the video and also subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.